GoodRx for Providers offers a streamlined way for healthcare providers to use GoodRx in a way that's designed to support their workflow. Accessible through web or mobile browsers, it's a way for HCPs to quickly compare medication prices across pharmacies and drug classes, view a personalized dashboard, and easily send coupons to patients. Here to talk about the valuable benefits of GoodRx for Providers is Akil Williams, VP of Strategy and Operations and the General Manager of GoodRx for Providers.
Okay, so first of all, Akil, let's start at the beginning. What is GoodRx for Providers, and how many people are using it, and how does the whole thing work?
Yeah, for sure. So GoodRx for Providers is a suite of solutions that we've built with providers' unique needs in mind. The centerpiece of GoodRx for Providers is Provider Mode, which is the GoodRx experience, but built for providers, with the provider-first mentality. We have over 900,000 providers currently on Provider Mode, almost 1 million. And we have them from all different specialties, from primary care and pediatrics to hematology and oncology and everything in between. I think we've seen significant usage of key specialties, whether it's dermatology and endocrinology, but there's not a specialty that practices that we haven't seen on GoodRx for Providers. So we're really excited that we can bring something to them that's unique, something that we've already seen them gravitate for. We have an opportunity to expand that, to build better solutions for them at that point of care, at that point of prescribing, and in key moments that matter.
And how is it uniquely suited for someone who's practicing medicine today?
Yeah, so the key thing for GoodRx Core, as I call it, is that our CEO is really user oriented, and that user originally was a consumer or a patient. So we've almost been maniacal about making sure that everything is geared towards that particular experience. And now that we're building for providers, we can be equally focused on the provider experience. What do they need? What are their unique needs? How can we remove clicks? How can we remove cruft of the design that may not fit?
What is cruft in design?
So cruft is things that kind of creep into your design. When you grow a platform over 12 and 13 years, and for a specific need, you might say, okay, this thing needs to be added, and this thing needs to be added, and then you look back and you have a lot of things added. And I think with GoodRx for Providers, we've been able to remove some of those things and to think, okay, what does a provider need? Like a clean sheet of paper. Providers coming here in moments that matter. They have a patient in front of them. They're in the exam room. They prescribe a drug, and the patient says, "Doc, how much is that going to cost me?" There's not a lot that a provider needs in that moment other than the cost and multiple ways to pay and maybe ways to compare it across therapeutic areas. So we've been able to kind of pull back on some of those design elements and then redo them and rethink them with a provider in mind.
One of the things you often hear about when you're talking about digital design is a seamless experience. Is that what you had in mind when you set out to design this?
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things our product leads always focus on is like, how can we remove clicks? How can we remove screens? How can we remove buttons or pop-ups? And how can we not paralyze them with too many options and too many selections? So I think we've spent a lot of time with providers. Internally, we have a set of providers that work for GoodRx that give us in-the-moment feedback. We call them our provider brain trust. But then we also go out to our power users, we go out to our seldom users, and we try to understand, okay, what does your day look like, and how can GoodRx for Providers fit into what you already do without creating a new app, a new experience, or anything that could distract you from what you're really on GoodRx for.
So part of a seamless experience is an easy experience.
Absolutely. I think simple design, and I think one of the things that's our competitive advantage, or our unique advantage at GoodRx already, is the hundreds of millions of patients that come there. They come there because it's simple, because it's frictionless, and within 10 seconds, they can get the coupon they need to get the access to the drug that they need. And we want to do the same thing and create that same experience for providers.
And ease of use and benefit builds trust, right?
Right. I think with our trust, we know that we're in a very key moment of the journey for that patient or for that provider to better health. And it's a moment that matters, that cost could scare you away, and you may never think about taking that therapy that could improve your condition. and is ultimately could be life or death in many situations. So we know we have to maintain that trust by building things that are simple, by building things that make sense, that you don't need a library or a dictionary to understand, and things that are really combine what we do from a consumer technology standpoint with healthcare technology, and really brings multiple stakeholders, providers, patients, our pharma manufacturers, all together at a very key moment, a moment that matters in their journey.
And it's really important to continue to evolve the product, right? Adding new feature sets and things like this. I keep hearing about a new feature that's coming called real-time benefit check. What's that all about?
So real-time benefit check is the #1 feature that our providers have asked us for since we started doing research and building provider mode. What real-time benefit check does is that a provider can already come to GoodRx to check the coupon, right? That a patient could use if they don't have insurance, if they're underinsured. What real-time benefit check does is it provides them that more comprehensive view of to say, okay, here's the GoodRx coupon, but what could my patient pay if they use their insurance? So if just 3 or 4 pieces of information, name, date of birth, gender, zip, that provider can get a accurate picture, a clear picture of how much that patient could pay if they use their insurance. That way their patient shows up at the pharmacy and they have a lot less surprises, and they can make that decision about how am I going to take care of this medication cost and get on the therapy that can ultimately help them to better health.
So we've talked a little bit about patients in GoodRx, and we've talked about healthcare providers in GoodRx. What about pharma? How does pharma figure into this equation?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. What we've understood about our farmer clients is that they don't really know how to balance this new world of hybrid between in real life and digital. Reps are continuing to lose access to doctors' offices where doctors and health systems are saying, you know what, we've lived without you in our offices for a couple of years because of the pandemic. Maybe we want to find a different way to access information. There's a different way we want to learn about your treatment. There's a different way we want to learn about your access program to help patients to get on therapy. And that's what we think we can offer. We have over 1 million providers, or nearly 1 million providers, that are coming to GoodRx on a fairly regular basis to, in that moment that matters, to say, I have a patient, they need this therapy, GoodRx, can you help? And what we want to be is we want to be that bridge between the patient, the provider, and the pharma client or the pharma manufacturer. And we think that we've been doing that for a long time, for 12 years. And it's almost like we just want to continue to do that and do that in a better way, more innovation, more focus on the provider's needs, as well as understanding what our pharma clients need.
Let's talk a little bit more about that rep access, because that's you make an interesting point that it essentially stopped during the pandemic, and it's coming back. But how do you see it coming back, and what advice would you give your clients, pharma companies, about that rep access with HCPs?
Well, this is not a new word in the pharma space. It's omni-channel, right? Like, you have to be everywhere, right? Like, you have to allow providers to get the information they need in the way they want it. And what we've seen with GoodRx is they want to come to GoodRx to get that information, to get that solution, to help their patient get on therapy. So I think the thing that I foresee in the near term and the long-term future is more opportunities for providers to get things on demand, more opportunities for providers to get things, at the tip of their finger, whether that's through GoodRx or other channels. We think they're going to come to GoodRx more and more with some of the solutions that we're building. For instance, we've built a cost compare solution. So if they're on one particular price page within GoodRx, they can see all the prices across a particular therapeutic area and across all the different pharmacies. So they can come to one place and see multiple different views and multidimensional. I think the other thing that we've done is we're building a real-time benefit check solution for providers. So what that sees is that, hey, I can see the GoodRx coupon. I can particularly see, potentially see a manufacturer solution offering as well. And then I can also see what that patient's covered price will be. And that gives that provider like real price transparency, which is really the backbone of GoodRx.
And how does that fit into an HCP's workflow? Because we all know how busy doctors and other healthcare providers are. You said earlier, seeing 20, 30 patients a day. They're very busy people, and they're really strapped for time. I assume that when you were designing this, you had to be super respectful of their workload and their workflow. How did you insinuate yourself into that?
So the interesting thing is, this is a nugget that I'm just giving you, Steve. Many people don't know is that, so GoodRx created an app for providers in 2016-17. It was called the GoodRx Pro app. And we saw heavy usage on that, power usage, if you will. But we actually saw even more usage on the web. So even small things like, do we create another app for providers? And I don't think anyone wants another app on their phone or their tablet or anything of that nature. So even just building GoodRx for providers and provider mode in a web experience fit more into their workflow. And when we started to do more research, we started to understand that providers would ultimately have their EHR open, they would have a clinical reference tool open, and then they would have GoodRx open. GoodRx would be that go-to place that as they were preparing for that cost conversation with their patient, they would say, where else can I go to help understand the cost of a drug other than GoodRx?
Let's talk a little bit more about the cost conversation. It's becoming, as prices rise, it's becoming much more common. When you were designing the platform, what did you learn about the cost conversation?
Well, the first thing we learned is that providers don't necessarily like to have it. I think they like to prescribe a medication and just know the medication is going to work and my patient's going to be able to get it. So that was the first thing, that we had to make the cost conversation. It's one of those things where I don't like to have it, but it's a necessity. So we had to design our flow in a way in which it just was natural for the provider. I actually was at the American Academy of Neurology last week, and a neurologist came up to us and said, I love GoodRx. He said, but if you told me 20 years ago I was going to have to talk to a patient about how much the drug costs, I would have told you I'm never going to do it. He said, but now every time I write a script, I have to think about, okay, how are they going to access this drug? So for us, again, it goes back to that transparency. So when that neurologist is writing this drug, and he or she is thinking about, okay, how much is it going to cost? What is the best path to access to get my patient on therapy? The quickest, the fastest, and without the least amount of headache for me, my staff, as well as the least amount of headache for the patient. We want them to turn to GoodRx and to GoodRx for providers. The only other thing I would share is that, one of the things that we're working to do with our pharma partners is to make sure that this scaled platform of close to 1 million providers across all specialties, dermatology, endocrinology, oncology, and everything in between, that they can have access or they can have visibility to the best access solutions that our pharma partners are creating. So that's what we hope to do in our manufacturer solutions team, is to bring those amazing support services that our pharma partners are working on, bring those to our large-scaled audience of providers. And we think it's a great partnership, and it's best for our pharma partners, it's best for the patient, and it's also best for the provider.
Great, thanks. Akil, this has been really interesting. Thanks very much. Appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time. I enjoyed the conversation.